Good evening and welcome to Spectacular Chicago. I'm Jim Balzer and I'll be your host. Tonight's episode is entitled Murder, Death, Kill. No, we won't be discussing the assassination attempt against Donald Trump, and we are certainly hopeful that President Biden doesn't sit there and say that he escaped the assassin's bullet. Today we're going to be discussing invasive technologies that pervade our life and interrupt our peaceful and quiet enjoyment and our constitutional expectations of privacy. And we're going to visit unkept campaign pledges by Chicago Mayor Johnson, who promised to rid the city of the scourge of ShotSpotter and new angle of the shooting of Adam Toledo by CPD, Chicago Police Department Officer Eric Stillman. I have a engineered perspective on what really happened there and why Mr. Stillman shot the suspect. In an effort to generate some thought and be helpful, we'll address Mayor Johnson's complete and unremarkable thinking for impaneling a reparations task force to distract our attention away from much infinitely more pressing issues such as the rampant crime, unfunded pensions, mass exodus of primary businesses, medium-sized businesses, small manufacturing businesses, and residents fleeing from Chicago and the state of Illinois. If you can put on screen the Illinois license plate. Our Illinois license plate reads, as you see, Land of Lincoln. For those who recall history class, President Abraham Lincoln's legacy, he was instrumental in the abolition of slavery, and Abraham Lincoln was the first elected United States Republican president. I want you to hold that thought. He was a Republican president. Okay, off screen. If you could go on screen with the new Illinois license plate. This license plate, as you read at the bottom, instead of being Land of Lincoln, it says, where our governors make our license plates. In Illinois, our former governors making our license plates suggest that they were in prison. As you can see, former disgraced Governor Ryan and Rod Blagojevich. What I want to know is where Governor Pritzker is going to fit. Off screen. We could go on screen with the donkey elephant signifying Democrats and Republicans. So a little history. The Republican Party is also known as the GOP, Grand Old Party, is one of the two major contemporary political parties in the United States. It emerged as the main political rival of the then dominant Democratic Party in the mid-1850s. And the two parties have dominated American politics ever since. So the Republican Party was founded in 1854 by anti-slavery activists who opposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and an act which allowed for the potential expansion of chattel slavery into the western territories of Kansas and Nebraska. So that was in the 1850s. It supported classical liberalism and economic reform while opposing the expansion of slavery into the free territories. The party initially had a very limited presence in the South, but was successful in the North and formed a majority in nearly every North American state. Southerners became alarmed at the threat of their slave trade. So with the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, the Deep South states seceded from the United States. And under the leadership of Lincoln and a Republican Congress, the Republican Party led the fight to defeat the Confederate States in the American Civil War, preserving the Union and abolishing slavery. This is the Republicans. Now we'll discuss the Democratic Party per Wikipedia, and it says and states the Democratic Party was founded in 1828. The Democratic Party is the world's oldest active political party. The party supported expansive presidential power, the interest of slave states. And I repeat, the interest of slave states. Its mantra, preserving the institution of slavery. The expansion engineered by then President Polk rendered the Democratic Party increasingly beholden to the Southern slave interest, which dominated the party from 1848 to their defeat in the Civil War, our American Civil War. If we can go off screen. Let's have a look at Mayor Johnson on screen, please. Therefore, Mayor Johnson, while you expose reparations for historical acts that occurred outside of Illinois in being applicable to Illinois residents, and I'll say this, after all, Illinois, the land of Lincoln, was a free state before the Civil War. Therefore, in my opinion, you are misguided in your agenda, your thought process, acts, and affiliation with a political party, Democratic Party, whose origins are inexorably tied to Southern slave interest and preserving the institution of slavery. So Mayor Johnson, you're a Democrat, which was a major supporter of slavery if you studied your history or bothered to. So Mayor Johnson, I'll say this, if at all you pretend to attend your business as mayor of the city of Chicago in the always free state of Illinois, and you wish to credibly discuss reparations, I implore you to relocate to a former Southern slave state and run for governor to make your case for reparations to the voters there. Now, in the Keller County suburbs, I inquired, and a resident responded that they like high taxes. When I inquired why, the response is, it keeps the riffraff out. But in Chicago, it has the opposite effect of keeping the riffraff in, and Chicago taxes have only significantly increased along with the crime rate. Now, the impoverishing property tax yoke on Chicago property owners, as we all understand, it's in the news. It's brutal. And I would say to the Northern Socialist Communist Democrats and to you, Mayor Johnson, I tell you this, we have become the new American slaves. Off screen with Mr. Johnson. Let's put on screen the baby duck. So Mayor Johnson, you train, I'll call your flock, much like Museum of Science and Industry baby duckling hatchlings, giving a warm light bulb and a ticking clock will rebut their own honest-to-God quacking mother, the truth. So I'll refer to your thinking as peak cognizant dissonance. Mr. Johnson, you should consider taking up farming because you contain all of the necessary nutrients. Off screen with the duckling. Next, we're going to redirect your attention to speeding cameras, red light cameras, flock, and the deadly ShotSpotter. Remember the politicians promising to remove all this SHIT? Now, how technology divides us causes us to opt out of participation in government. There was and I'm going to read here. A privacy expert, Jody Daniels, warns of flock technology creates an environment where individuals feel as though they are under constant surveillance. Flock is a video monitoring that's worked through the cell phones, cell towers, that records our license plates. It takes pictures in real time, and it maintains that. This can lead to a chilling effect on free speech and other civil liberties, as people might become hesitant to express themselves or participate in certain activities, she states, due to fear of being recorded and possibly monitored by law enforcement. Well, that's already come. So we'll start off with the speed cameras. If you could go on screen with the speed camera image. So I'm going to give you some statistics. 9,132,409 tickets issued since they were turned on in 2013. Chicago speed cameras have generated $879 million for the city, sending that number of tickets to motorists. That's more than 3 tickets per Chicagoan on almost a ticket for 3 of every 4 Illinois residents. Chicago speed cameras hit motorists with over $102 million in fines during 2023, and the $879 million total that I referred to earlier, since they started flashing a decade ago. The mayor promised to eliminate the automated traffic cams, which issues tickets every 20 seconds last year. The bulk fine collected, including late fees last year, so speed cameras collected $46.9 million from fines paid on time, and an additional $55.4 million from tickets that included late fee, more than doubling the cost. So if you don't get it in time, mail is not exactly reliable. You're screwed. So late penalties can turn a 35 citation into an $85 fine. A $100 speeding violation could cost a driver $244 if payment is made late. If we could go on screen, take off screen with Miss Lori Lightfoot. Since they were turned on in 2013, the $879 million that I referred to earlier, Miss Lori Lightfoot determined to lower the speeding threshold to tickets drivers going 6 to 10 miles over the limit. Why the lowered speeding ticket threshold? Because Lori Lightfoot determined speed camera revenue dropped in 2023 by about $30 million from 2022. Well, why is that? We were in the middle of a pandemic, despite 11 more cameras operating. Oh my God, the public is holding out on us. We'll show them. So top revenue cameras among the 169 active cameras at the time of the publication of the article, over 1 million in tickets, and 5 issued over 2 million in tickets before late fees were added. 3 of the 5 2 million cameras were located on the south side, and the number 1 camera generated more than 2.5 in fines was at 901 North Clark Street near Washington Square. So Chicagoans on the north side bore the brunt of the tickets, 44%, and citywide in 2023, and the west side involved the second most in 26%. I don't know if this is the promised reparations against the north siders that Mayor Johnson is referring to, but I think that might be accomplished through that medium. Let's go off screen. So when Lightfoot campaigned, she promised to reduce the city's over-reliance on taking fines and fees from low-income residents. But after becoming mayor, she lowered the speeding threshold for cameras and fined drivers for traveling 6 to 10 miles an hour over the limit. Nobody does that, right? So what do we have now? On July 17th of this year, Chicago aldermen, I'm reading the article here, introduced a proposal to lower citywide default speed limit, meaning that if you don't see a sign, that's the speed, to 25 miles per hour. Alderman Daniel LaSpada, the first aldermanic district, said even a small reduction in speed on city streets could drastically reduce the number of traffic fatalities every year in Chicago. Where's his study? And we're lulled into ignorant bliss that Chicago will somehow be safer by lowering the speed limits? Seriously? a safer city of Chicago by lowering the default speed limit. All it's going to do is increase revenue. This is all about a revenue play. All the promises unkept to get rid of all this stuff, unkept. And they want to do more to us, want to screw us again and again and again. Now, let's go back on screen with our illustrious Mayor Johnson. Mr. Johnson pledged to phase out speed cameras during his final televised debate against Paul Vallas, but unfortunately the Chicago budget counts on residents paying $348 million fines. I'm getting different figures here, but I'm using what I have. Fees from parking tickets, speeding, red light camera tickets, booting, and other vehicle infractions to remain balanced. $46 million more than we budgeted for 2023. Johnson himself has fines, racked up 1,640 worth of traffic citation, and 8 of those were from speed cameras. We don't even know if Johnson pays those tickets, but Chicago, he declined a request for comment on whether he plans to phase out Chicago speed cameras and give up over $100 million a year as promised during his campaign. This image is of his campaign. We can take this man away. On screen, please, with the red light camera. Red light cameras have been creating their own set of additional corruption problems in Chicago. A former Chicago official was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison for taking $2 million in bribes from a different red light camera company to secure a contract with the city. As with the speed cameras, the red light cameras are a huge source of revenue for Chicago. I have a 2020 statistic. They're talking about $52 million from 300 cameras. That sounds low. So when Chicago first installed 2 red light cameras in 2003, we now have 300. Plus, Chicago is the only Illinois city to operate 169 speed cameras that issued 1.5 million tickets worth $102 million in 2023 alone. And we see an earlier investigation found red light cameras issued over 1 billion in tickets from 2008 to 2018. That's pretty significant. Wait, didn't the politicians blow a hole in the budget when they sold the parking meters? So since the city no longer receives that revenue, why are they now trying to install more parking meters in our neighborhoods? That revenue doesn't go to the city. It goes United Arab Emirates or somebody in the Middle East is getting all that money. Okay, off screen, let's go to the flock image, please. Now, you ask what flock is. I touched on it a little earlier, but Flock's products consist of cameras which monitor traffic and photograph the rear of all passing vehicles. Their software uses artificial intelligence. That's a term we're hearing a lot about lately, and there's a lot of concern over it. And it's there to read vehicles' license plates and identify other distinguishing physical characteristics, sending that information to a central server via cellular network. I'd like to know who that network is so we can all unsubscribe from that cellular provider. So Flock servers then log this identifying data with the time and location of the scan in a searchable database and compare all results with the National Crime Information Center, as well as state and local police watch lists of cars that are reported stolen or otherwise of interest, instantly alerting police and other officers nearby upon a match. Flock stated that the system's ability to identify vehicles' visual features, which it calls vehicle fingerprint technology, is unique. So they can get the identity, vehicle, make, model, color, as well as other distinguishing attributes, such as dents, stickers, temporary license plates, allowing investigators to search for recorded vehicles based on these characteristics. That sounds like very Orwellian 1984 to me. So our Illinois law on the use of flock states, the images and data collected by the cameras may be extracted by an authorized user and used by any municipal police department, county sheriff, state police, blah, 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 with jurisdiction in the investigation of any offense involving vehicular hijacking, aggravated vehicle hijacking, terrorism, motor vehicle theft, and other forcible felonies. And that's Illinois compiled statutes 140/5 for those that you like to Google. However, I received responsive documents received pursuant to FOIA, which indicate that the Countryside Police Department used flock for a very improper purpose. Apparently, some guy's girlfriend came and wrote lipstick something on his windshield. He didn't like it. The police were called, and they used flock to try to find the girlfriend. Okay, can we go off screen a second here? So there was a lawsuit filed against Flock entitled Stephanie Scholl and Frank Bednarz. They're the plaintiffs. And the case number is 24-4435. It was filed here in our Northern District Court of Illinois versus the Illinois State Police. Brendan F. Kelly, J. Robert Pritzker. They get it right. J. Robert, not JB, J. Robert. So JR. Kwame Raoul, could it be? So they're defendants, and it basically states in the intro, and I'll read one sentence. Defendants, Illinois State Police, and officials responsible for that agency are operating a system of dragnet surveillance, recording the whereabouts of every resident of Cook County who drives a car or a truck, and are expanding this mass surveillance across the entire states. We're being surveilled. Red light cameras, speed cameras, we got flock, and that's quite a bit. So let's move on here. So obviously the American Civil Liberties is starting to chime in, and there are concerns that flock systems may cause harm, especially to minorities. So the ACLU released a report in March 2022 criticizing Flock's safety business model and its products. And in 2023, I'm just reading here from some data that I have. For example, we do not generally object to them, check license plates against stolen cars, Amber Alerts, toll collection. That's how it all started. The camel got its nose in the tent through the toll collection. Nobody saw that coming. Of course, nobody paid attention when speed cameras, red light cameras, now we got Flock, we got ShotSpotter, we got all these technologies surveilling us, and it's not going to get better. So a lot of these technologies are disproportionately deployed in low-income communities and communities of color, and that the hot lists they run are run against are legitimate and up to date. But there's no reason, they say, for the technology to be used to create comprehensive records of everybody's comings and goings, and that's what they're doing. Just wait. And then they store it in a database. So the government should not be tracking us, at least unless it has individualized suspicions that we're engaged in wrongdoing. We're being tracked. I'm not even going to talk about how they maintain, every text you send on your cell phone, every phone call you made, back to Obama. He did that. He got caught. All those records were dumped to WikiLeaks, remember? Let's go back to, okay. So I'm reading just some excerpts here. So a vast majority of the images taken are not connected to any criminal activity whatsoever. As most jurisdictions have no policies regarding retention limits, many agencies keep those scans on innocent people indefinitely. Okay? This can allow government to maintain an overarching and potentially unconstitutional level of surveillance and could lead to abuse, as indeed it has, as I described the woman who put lipstick on her ex-boyfriend's car. Flock, obviously, that was a carjacking. She's, lipstick, deadly. It goes on to say, in some instances, officers have misused confidential databases to get information on romantic partners. That means they're using it for their own personal business associates, neighbors, journalists, and for other reasons that have nothing to do with daily police work. So professionals' abuse includes targeting religious minorities, communities of color. Reproductive rights advocates are now raising alarms about the ways police and others use these technologies for the targeting of abortion clinics in the wake of Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. A lot of people don't understand. Roe versus Wade is from the American Revolution, when George Washington was crossing the Delaware River contemplating how to, transverse. He asked one of his partners, he says, should we row or should we wade? So on that note, we have critics that argue for stringent controls. The cat is out of the bag. These technologies are running rampant. And at the time a lot of this were thought up, we didn't have artificial intelligence running the show. So it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, unless our politicians step up and wake up, or we deselect them and put them out of office. So, as the word flock implies, we are the sheeple, like Shorn Yu in the headlights. Okay, going to transition to ShotSpotter. We've had a lot of discussion. The aldermanic, Mayor Johnson, of course, promised to get rid of that too when he was campaigning. He didn't do it. But one thing that has come out, ShotSpotter records audio, takes certain sound waves, and it, tries to condense that, and it doesn't do a very good job of it, but it tries to triangulate the sounds to figure out where a pop is coming from, maybe from a gun or a firecracker, what have you. I sat in on the trial of Ernesto Godinez. That's the back of the yards, and that is involving the feds. Federal agents were installing tracking devices on certain gang members' cars. And one of the gang members saw who we thought were fellow gang members or opposing gang members, hoodies, and he shot. Put a bullet through one of the agents, went through his eye and out the side. And they eventually, of course, Ernesto Godinez was caught. And I sat through the trial, and the takeaway from it was, since the agents were there and you heard their radios, and I'm saying, wait a minute, they say this doesn't record our voices. It was truncated, but I could hear in the shot, and then I could hear voices. So when the president of ShotSpotter goes on the Craig Dellimore show, and Craig Dellimore, dude, ShotSpotter says it doesn't record voices. I sat in on a trial where the exhibits were the ShotSpotter soundings, and I could hear voices. Let's put on screen the ShotSpotter image, please. So ShotSpotter has rebranded to SoundThinking. In this instance, an oxymoron. But they have successfully marketed their ShotSpotter forensic gunshot detection method to police departments and prosecutors as they call it a reliable method for detecting and locating gunfire incidents in urban environments and generating admissible evidence for use in criminal prosecution. So the ShotSpotter method involves networks of microphones deployed in urban settings, which are tasked with detecting impulsive sounds of gunfire and transmitting the sound recordings to SoundThinking's black box. a logarithm, and human examiners for forensic analysis. Keep in mind, this is ShotSpotter's technology. They don't have to release their data, the software cycle, or anything for defense attorneys or anybody else to examine. They just sit there and say, oh yeah, this is accurate, and it's taken as true, and it's a black box, a logarithm, and they're not using proper human examiners for forensic analysis. So if the impulsive noises are suspected to have originated from gunfire, allegedly SouthThinking alerts local police departments so the officers can quickly respond and investigate. Well, that can be problematic. So the reliability of ShotSpotter is hindered by technically challenged environments where ShotSpotter systems are deployed. Neighborhoods with dense buildings and other infrastructure, and the routine occurrence of impulsive noises, vehicle traffic, construction equipment, and many other things that are known to trigger false ShotSpotter alerts. So to assess the ability of the method like SouthThinking's gunshot detection method to reliably complete their forensic tasks and to quantify important rates of error, method developers like SouthThinking are supposed to engage in multi-step development process involving validation testing, a logarithm verification, and error rate analysis. Yet, SouthThinking has largely ignored this development process, instead promoting accuracy and performance claims that have no legitimate scientific basis. And neither the scientific community nor the judicial system have engaged in the form of oversight that should preclude the use of such untested forensic evidence in criminal justice systems. So the result has been a proliferation of ShotSpotter systems in 150 U.S. cities and the use of ShotSpotter evidence in over 200 criminal trials without proof that the ShotSpotter method works, and in the face of growing evidence that the method is plagued by a high incidence of false alerts, in light of the fact that ShotSpotter systems are deployed primarily in communities of color, and the harms associated with ShotSpotter false alerts are borne primarily by people of color. Both the scientific and legal communities need to engage in rigorous oversight of SouthThinking forensic method. Okay, so until that occurs, ShotSpotter evidence should play no role in the criminal justice system. We're going to go on to off-screen. So, SouthThinking, as they're now called, has vigorously been lobbying our aldermen to keep the system in place in Chicago. Why is that? Well, you got the Adam Toledo case. Supposedly, soundings came, police arrived, see two guys. They're not entitled to a Terry stop just because they see people, but if they get a false ShotSpotter sounding, could have happened a quarter of a mile away. After all, the area where Adam Toledo, they claim, is a checkerboard in Little Village of gangs. Anybody could have been firing there. It's a very common occurrence. Firecrackers and guns, people celebrate, they fire guns in the air. That's just I guess part of the culture, as I understand it. So I'm going to read some additional information here, and this is taken from a scientific article. It says, the ShotSpotter system exposes individuals who live within its surveillance to a significant risk of harm and unjustified investigation at the hands of police officers responding to oftentimes unreliable alerts. Each ShotSpotter alert points police to a specific location and tells them someone is armed. There's no camera, just a sound, okay? And I've seen the soundings. It looks like it's a flat graph of, it doesn't take the fingerprint of the gun. We don't know if it's that gun. And then they sit there and say, oh, this was the gun that was fired. and there's no, what shall I say, sound analysis of the shot spotter. It's just like a Jacob's ladder of light on a screen. It's a pile of nothing. Okay, so individually, in the vicinity of an alert, are immediately under the suspicion by officers who are primed. They're primed to believe that they are entering a dangerous situation. Okay. Meanwhile, residents in the vicinity will typically have no idea why the police are descending on a particular spot. They won't know that ShotSpotter has interpreted some loud noise perceived to be a gunshot. This creates a highly volatile scenario and can produce unwarranted investigatory stops, hostile encounters, and potentially dangerous intrusions on residents in the community. Now, Adam Toledo's family will speak to that situation. So I'm going to read seizures by police based on ShotSpotter alerts are unconstitutional because attaching individualized suspicions to every person out and about in a residential area, or even to the first person cited, merely because they were there where shots reported nearby, would incriminate a very large category of presumably innocent people. And I'm not going to read the case cite on this, but it says, the finding no reasonable suspicion to conduct a Terry stop, even though officers received multiple calls of shots fired. Okay, so we have untested technology. The manufacturer controls the software and the life cycle. They're the ones that are submitting the so-called forensic information, which is under any other standard would not be allowed. Okay, so let's get to the murder, death, kill. On screen, Eric Stillman. We're going to get into, this is Mr. Stillman. There he is smiling. There seems some pretty potent weapons in that picture. And we're going to get into what I believe, what really happened at the shooting. What caused Mr. Stillman to imperceptibly shoot Adam Toledo. So if we could go off screen and we can segue into the video of Mr. Stillman with his strobe. You'll see here Eric Stillman chasing Adam Toledo. He's got a strobe. You'll see a strobe. Okay. So in that video, you see rapid, very bright strobe effect. Now, if we sit there and flash a strobe light in somebody's eyes at night, you essentially disable that person, you blind them. The problem is that the person using the strobe light is also affected. So strobe lights, whether a flashlight or in any other context, create their disorientating effect through rapid and repetitive flashes of light. These flashes occur at a frequency that is carefully chosen to interact with the human visual system in unique ways. In other words, prevent us from seeing. So our eyes perceive light through a delicate interplay between photoreceptor cells called rods and cones, I'm not going to get too technical on it. I'm not an ophthalmologist, but cones are responsible for color vision and detailed perception in well-lit conditions. Rods come into play in low light scenarios, so detecting motion and helping us navigate in the dark. So when exposed to strobe light, you're in the dark, the rapid on-off cycling interrupts the normal rhythm of visual processing, causing the brain to interpret the light in unpredictable ways. So this is the strobe, and I believe it's the model, make and model used on Mr. Eric Stillman's service revolver. And so for those that might be a little light sensitive, if you're epileptic, you can't watch this, but I'm gonna shine this onto the screen so you can get a feel for what this strobe is like. This device is rated at 1,000 lumens. That's an incredible amount of light, and this gets in your eyes. You're gonna have some serious, you could have some eye damage, you could have problems. And first I'll show you what it looks like on screen. I'll turn this on, so if you're light sensitive or you have any issues, medical conditions, do not watch this segment. I'll just put it on. So there's a fancy switch here, and then I'm gonna go. That's what it looks like, and I feel myself just looking at this coming back at me, being disorientated, and I'm in full light here in a dark environment. This doesn't only mess up with the person who it's at, but me. And already I can feel a certain illness. I feel a sweatiness just from being exposed to this, just for the brief period, even in this bright light. So I'm going to talk about the effects of strobe lighting, taking from some technical articles that I've perused that discuss it. So one of the main reasons a strobe on a flashlight is disorienting, as you see, lies in its ability to disrupt the brain's ability to perceive motion and spatial orientation accurately. So the rapid flashes of the light trick the brain into interpreting the scene as a series of still frames rather than a continuous flow. This can lead to a distorted perception of movement, causing disorientation and confusion. In essence, the strobe interferes with the brain's ability to process visual information smoothly, creating a jarring experience for the observer. So strobe lights also mess with our ability to process motion accurately. Normally our brains use motion cues to gauge the movement of people or things around us and our own physical orientation. So the rapid flashing of a strobe light interferes with this process, causing objects to appear as if they're jerking around or teleporting. I like that word, teleporting. So this distortion of motion cues can make it difficult to navigate, react to changes, and maintain a sense of spatial awareness. So we have Officer Stillman sitting there with this strobe on, and Mr. Adam Toledo. He's not Mr., he's a 13-year-old, he's a boy. And Mr. Stillman he's claiming he's making a split-second decision to kill somebody. He's got a goddamn strobe light. He should not have been using the strobe light. Had he not used the strobe light, Adam Toledo probably would still be alive today. So this goes on to talk about the impact of cognizant processing. So it says here, this is interesting, the disorientating effect of strobe on a flashlight extends beyond mere visual perception. Research suggests that exposure to strobe light can impact cognitive functions such as decision-making, memory, and even balance. These are all necessary things when you're a police officer in the field. The erratic nature of the light disrupts the brain's ability to process information cohesively, leading to difficulties in making quick judgments necessary for a police officer. or recalling details accurately. So I'm going to segue. I have a copy of a transcript taken of Mr. Eric Stillman by the plaintiff, of course. There's a personal injury or wrongful death case filed by the estate of Adam Toledo, his family. And Mr. Stillman can't remember very many things, and he had 3 hours of deposition here. He can barely remember his own name. He doesn't remember where he works. So he's saying he's still working for the police department, but he actually wasn't anymore. He's working for an elevator company, but yeah, he lied. But I'll get into the portion of this deposition where he talks about the light in his own words. So let me go back to this. So the so additionally, the visual disruption caused by the strobe can affect our sense of equilibrium, potentially leading to dizziness or unsteadiness. So just this split second, a few seconds I had this strobe on, I feel a little unease, literally. So I talked about this deposition that he took for 3 hours, and I'll say this, defendant's counsel, 3 hours was given to the plaintiff to depose this officer. He didn't give truthful answers. He blew off the answers. He says, I don't know, I don't recall. His attorney, objects to every question that was legitimate to burn up the time, and very little was taken from this. But here's one, because they didn't understand that their own client might have been affected by the strobe light. I'm going to read plaintiff's the segment of the deposition that talks about the light. It says, question, you did not, would you agree that previously testified before Adam stopped at the opening in the fence, you did not see his hands? That's correct. Do you know what the purpose of a strobe light is? To disorient. I believe it is to disorient. And the question goes back to disorient? Yes, disorient. That's what Eric Stillman said. And then the question becomes, the person who's holding the strobe light or the person that the strobe light is pointed? That's the question. The person that the strobe light is pointed at, says Mr. Stillman. So if you point a strobe light at me, presumably I'm disoriented by the flashing on the off, right? On and off. And then he answers, if you're disoriented, you're disoriented. And then another question, and would this have any effect on you, that flashing light? I don't believe it does, he says, but it could. I mean, it's something that I'm observing, so it could. You're goddamn right it could. I just turned it on myself, and I'm affected. Having that thing on for too long, as long as he did, while he was chasing Adam Stillman through the alley, and then he's got to make he claims he makes a split-second decision to shoot. It's because he can't see what's going on because his vision is messed up. And then it goes, it could, right? You can disorient both the target and the person who initiates the strobe. Right? There's another. Mr. Stillman says, that's a possibility. So we have all of the geniuses miss a very important law of physics, a strobe light. Nobody's talked about this. I didn't see it in any of the attorney stuff except the attorney for the plaintiff. Broach touched on it, but maybe doesn't quite understand the physics of the light. So this visible light can cause temporary night blindness as it overwhelms the photoreceptors in the eye, requiring time to recover before adjusting to the dark. You wake up in the middle of the night, you go to the bathroom, you can't turn on the bathroom lights. You want to have a little night light on the wall so you can kind of see. Just enough light so the rods can, help you see at night. But you turn that light on, you're going to be blinded. So, and that's caused by visible light. Can we go on screen with the eyeball image? So you see in this image the rods and the cones of the human eye. And in the back, as I discussed, the cones are for visual light, so you can see colors during bright ambient light, and the rods allow us to see at night. And these are the two types of photoreceptors involved in sight. Again, the rods work at the very low light levels. We use these for night vision because only a few bits of light, photons, which is light, can activate a rod. Rods don't help with color vision, which is why at night we see everything in grayscale. The human eye has over 100 million rod cells. Cones require a lot of light. They're used to see color. So we have three types of cones for blue, green, and red, and the human eye only has about 6 million cones. Many of these are packed into the back of the eye and help with sharpness and detail of images. And then, some animals have, to see in the dark, have quite a few more rods than humans do. Okay, I'm going to segue to the differences between the rods and the cones. Now, we covered that a little bit. So rods are for very light sensitive to scattered light. And the cones are not very light sensitive only to direct light. So no rods, loss causes night blindness. No cones, loss causes legal blindness. And then the rods have a very, very, very slow response to light. Stimuli added over time. So what that means is you turn on a light, you lose sight. That's what happened with this strobe light going on. So I'd like to conclude our show, and I'm going to throw in some comments on the matter from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, commonly known as AOC, and then off screen. Then we will hear from Jim Morrison of The Doors. He has a few things to say in regards to Mr. Stillman. So AOC states, on the Adam Toledo matter, the prosecutor did not make an error. He lied. He lied about the police killing a child. Ending this isn't just about consequences for who pulls the trigger. It's about admitting to and confronting an entire system that exists to protect, defend, and cover up state violence. And that's what the city of Chicago is doing here. They can't get rid of this cop. Copo wants to fire him. The former acting superintendent of police they can't get rid of him. It's got to go to the union now. The union puts in arbitrators, and they're going to decide. Arbitrators appointed by the union would be akin to beseeching the whores to shut down the whorehouse. So I felt compelled to come on and talk about the matter. So in parting, let's now hear from Jim Morrison.
The killer awoke before dawn. He put his boots on. He took a face from the ancient gallery and he walked on down the hallway, baby. Came to a door. And he looked inside.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. And on that note, good night.